I still remember the evening, my life shattered like glass. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, a celebration for Paul's 60th birthday, a time for laughter, good food, and memories shared. But when Janet stood up to make a toast, something inside me twisted. Her voice trembled as she began talking about their dog, Buddy, and her sudden grief over his passing. I'd never seen her this shaken, and I couldn't understand why, as I sat there trying to soak in the moment. Then, in one breath, everything changed. Without warning, Janet's gaze locked onto mine. Her eyes, once full of warmth, were now ice cold. She pointed a shaking finger at me, and in front of everyone, she accused me of killing Buddy. Out of jealousy, she said. Jealous of her bond with the dog, of all things. It felt like the ground beneath me disappeared. My heart raced as my mind couldn't keep up. How could this be happening? How could she, of all people, accuse me of something so vile? How could the whole family believe her? I sat there in stunned silence, my pulse deafening in my ears. The laughter, the conversation, everything stopped. It was as though the world had frozen, and I was the center of this horrible nightmare. I thought I would wake up at any moment, but I didn't. Instead, I felt eyes burning into me, eyes full of judgment, eyes that had once embraced me as family. I left that dinner with my heart in pieces, alone, confused, and betrayed. How could she believe such a thing? How could she accuse me of something so monstrous, and why did the whole family side with her? That night, I didn't know where to go or what to do. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. My name is Claudia, and at 35 years old, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. 10 years ago, I met Stephen during our senior year of college. We were paired together for a business project, and at first, I didn't think much of it. He was persistent, though, finding reasons to meet outside class, asking for help, even when he didn't need it. Eventually, he asked me for coffee to talk over our notes, and that coffee turned into dinners, movie nights, and soon enough, we were inseparable. Stephen was charming, confident, and funny. I could tell from the moment we met that he was different. We spent every free moment together, and within months, I knew he was the one. After graduation, we dated for 2 years before he proposed. Our wedding was everything we dreamed of, thanks to the support of Stephen's parents, Janet and Paul, who were always there for us. Janet especially became a second mother to me, offering advice, teaching me recipes, and even watching the kids when I went back to work after having Abby. Our life seemed perfect. After having our 3 children, Abby, Noah, and Amelia, we settled into a beautiful home. Stephen was promoted at work, and while the promotion meant more travel, we adjusted, finding comfort in family and the routines we'd built. Janet and Paul were always around to help. I relied on them, especially Janet, and considered her a mother figure in my life. But then things started to change. Stephen's job demanded more of his time, and as he traveled more, I found myself handling everything at home alone. The kids needed me, and I was constantly balancing work with their needs. Janet and Paul stepped in more, helping with the kids, cooking meals, and even bringing over groceries when I couldn't find the time to shop. At first, it was a relief, but over time, things began to feel different. Janet was always supportive, but I started noticing things that made me uneasy. She became more involved, more opinionated about the way I was raising the kids. I started feeling like I was losing control over my own home. I had always been close to her, but now there was tension in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then, when Stephen started traveling more for work, those feelings intensified. I was alone more than ever, and Janet was there every step of the way, trying to fill the gap, but at what cost? It wasn't until Paul's 60th birthday dinner that everything finally exploded, when the family turned on me, accusing me of something so ridiculous, so devastating, that I felt my entire world crack in half. The first sign that something was off came when Stephen's work started demanding more of his time. At first, it was only a few days away each month, but soon it became weeks at a time. I could see the change in him, the stress of the job creeping into his words, his mood, and his absence. The kids missed him, and I found myself shouldering everything, working long hours at my job, managing the house, and keeping up with the kids' activities. Janet was always there, a constant presence, helping with the kids, cooking meals, even driving Abby and Noah to their after-school activities. She was trying to help, but there was something in the way she did it that started to feel like she was taking over. She would make suggestions about how I was raising the kids, telling me that I needed to relax, that I was too stressed. At first, I appreciated her help, but over time, I began to feel suffocated. Then there were the moments that I started noticing, small things. Stephen's sudden absences. When I would come home after a late meeting, I would find him sitting on the couch with Janet, laughing, talking like old friends. They'd been watching movies without me, laughing at jokes I wasn't in on. There were times when they would go shopping together, and I'd come home to find new groceries in the kitchen, things I hadn't bought. I tried to brush it off, but a nagging feeling wouldn't let go. One afternoon, I came home early from work, only to find them sitting together at the dining table, eating dinner, candles lit, half-empty wine glasses between them. I had texted earlier that I'd be late, but they didn't wait for me. When I asked why they didn't, Jensen simply shrugged, saying Maxine wanted to go ahead and eat. She quickly cleaned up, as if the situation wasn't odd at all. I wanted to dismiss these moments, but my gut told me something was wrong. I asked Jensen if there was anything going on. He shrugged it off, saying I was being silly, but the doubts lingered. Maxine had been through a lot after the wedding, but she was always around, more present than I felt comfortable with. And when Jensen wasn't there, I noticed that Maxine dressed differently, wearing makeup at home, leaning in when he spoke, laughing louder at his jokes. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Then, one evening, when I came home from a long meeting, I found them again, Maxine sitting next to Jensen, too close. Her body leaned into his, her head resting against his shoulder. It wasn't a friendly gesture. It wasn't the closeness of family. And I could see it in their eyes. Something was happening. I never imagined it would end this way, so suddenly, so painfully, like a dream turning into a nightmare. It all came crashing down on a Thursday evening. I had left work early, anticipating a quiet evening with my family. I planned to pick up dinner, surprise Jensen and Maxine with takeout from our favorite restaurant. I was excited to finally spend some time with them, to reset the growing tension that had built up between us. But when I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. Both of their cars were there. The house was still and quiet, but as I walked inside, I could feel the weight of the air around me. The usual sounds of Maxine's laughter or Jensen's voice were absent. The living room was too still. I found Maxine sitting on the couch wearing a red silk nightgown, a nightgown I had never seen before. The silk fabric clung to her body, the thin straps exposing her shoulders. I paused in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing. Maxine had her legs tucked beneath her, and Jensen was sitting next to her, too close. His arm brushed hers as they sat side by side, their heads nearly touching as they leaned in toward the television. It looked like a casual evening, but it wasn't. I stood frozen, unable to speak. My mind raced. The room was silent except for the faint noise coming from the television. They both jumped when they saw me standing in the doorway. Maxine immediately grabbed a throw blanket from the couch and covered herself, her face flushing red. Jensen stood up abruptly, as if to shield her. I asked the question that had been bubbling in my chest, the question that had been gnawing at me for months, but I couldn't stop myself. "What's going on here?" My voice was shaky, but I knew what I had seen. Maxine, now visibly uncomfortable, stammered, It's just, I was cold." She fidgeted with the blanket, unable to look me in the eye. "It's just the couch. It's small. We were just watching TV." I walked further into the room, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The room, once filled with the comfort of home, now felt foreign. Every piece of furniture felt like it belonged to someone else. I turned to Jensen, my husband, the man I had spent nearly a decade with, the man who had promised me forever. "Jensen, why is she dressed like this? Why are you sitting so close to her? What the hell is going on?" My voice cracked, the frustration and hurt pouring out uncontrollably. Jensen opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. He looked at Maxine, then back at me, guilt evident in his eyes. But instead of defending himself, instead of apologizing or explaining, he looked down, avoiding my gaze. "It's not what you think," he said, though his words felt hollow, like a poor attempt at patching up a wound too deep to heal with a single sentence. "Maxine, she's been going through a lot, and I've just been trying to be there for her." "Just trying to be there for her?" I repeated, my voice rising. "This isn't just trying to be there for someone, Jensen. This is crossing a line. I turned back to Maxine. You're supposed to be my best friend. You were supposed to be my maid of honor. And this is how you repay me? Maxine's face contorted, and she stood up quickly, dropping the blanket to the floor. I never meant to hurt you, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't want things to be like this. I didn't mean to. Don't! I cut her off, stepping closer. Don't try to justify this. I've watched you get closer and closer to my husband over the past few months, and now this? I could feel my chest tightening, the betrayal sinking deeper with every word. Maxine, you're supposed to be my friend, but instead you're sleeping with my husband behind my back. How could you do this to me? Jensen, still silent, was now looking at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. He didn't even have the decency to try to explain. His inaction spoke volumes. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't need to hear any more lies. Pack your things, Maxine. I want you out of my house by tomorrow morning. My voice was firm, though my heart was breaking. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe she had done this to me. But more than anything, I couldn't believe that my husband, the man I had trusted with everything, had allowed this to happen. Maxine's face fell, and she started to cry. I have nowhere to go, she whispered, pleading with me. Please don't make me leave. I thought we were friends. You don't get to play the victim here, I spat, the anger building within me. You've destroyed everything. Don't try to manipulate me. I want you out. I turned away from her and walked into our bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I heard Jensen's voice calling from the living room, but I didn't respond. The tears came then. They were the kind of tears that burned, ones that stung with the bitterness of betrayal. I heard Jensen sleep on the couch that night, and I didn't care. The damage had been done. Maxine, my best friend, had crossed a line that could never be undone, and Jensen, my husband, had allowed it. The night was long, too long. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Maxine, crying and begging me to understand, and Jensen, his silence cutting deeper than any words could. I felt like I was suffocating in the weight of what had just happened, the images replaying over and over in my mind. I thought back to when Stephen and I first met, the way he had promised me that he'd never betray me. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the good and bad, the promises we made to each other. I couldn't make sense of it. How had it come to this? I questioned myself. What had I missed? Had I been so absorbed in my own world, in work and managing everything at home, that I failed to see the cracks in my marriage? The truth felt suffocating. Was I to blame for not being present enough? Was I so consumed by my career that I allowed Stephen and Maxine to grow too close? I replayed every moment, every conversation, every look exchanged between them. There were signs, weren't there? Small ones. The way Maxine would laugh a little too loudly at Jensen's jokes, the way she'd touch his arm during casual conversations, the shopping trips they took together, the dinners they shared while I was working late. I had dismissed it all, chalked it up to her grieving, to her needing support. But now, in the harsh light of betrayal, I saw the truth. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the woman who had been my best friend, the woman who had shared every moment of my life, could do this to me. And I didn't want to believe that my husband, my partner, my confidant, had allowed it. But here I was, alone in our bedroom, drowning in the silence that had once been filled with love and trust. I took a deep breath. I couldn't keep spiraling. I couldn't keep blaming myself. This was on them, not me. They had crossed a line. They had betrayed me. But now I had to face them. I had to face Jensen. I had to confront the man I had shared my life with, the man who had chosen her over me. The days that followed were a blur, a storm of emotions that I couldn't quite navigate. I kept replaying the confrontation with Maxine, the cold way I had kicked her out, and the haunting silence of my house when I locked myself away in our bedroom, trying to make sense of everything. But there was no clarity, no easy answers. Maxine's departure wasn't the end of it. If anything, it had only just begun. Jensen stayed away from me, his presence a ghost in the house. He didn't try to apologize, didn't attempt to explain himself. He simply stayed in the living room, avoiding me like I was the one who had done something wrong. His silence ate away at me, and I hated it. The man I had loved, the man I had shared everything with, was now nothing but a stranger to me. He wouldn't meet my eyes, wouldn't engage in any conversation. Every word I tried to say felt like it bounced off an invisible wall between us. And it wasn't just Jensen. Janet started calling, her voice shaking with concern, her words full of accusations. She told me how much I had hurt her son, how I was tearing their family apart. She said I needed to forgive Maxine, that she was grieving, that she didn't know what she was doing. She begged me to let it go, to heal the wounds before they got too deep. She even tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "A real woman would put family first." Her words were meant to break me, but all they did was fuel the fire inside me. The more she spoke, the more I understood how deeply embedded the toxicity ran. She couldn't see past her own son's hurt. She couldn't see what her son had done to me, what Maxine had done. They were protecting each other, refusing to face the reality of their actions. The next few days were filled with phone calls, with attempts from Stephen's family to intervene, to make things right, but nothing they said made a difference. They were all in denial, all trying to preserve the illusion of family, while I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. And then it got worse. One night, after a particularly heated conversation with Janet, I sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I needed answers. I needed proof. I couldn't keep doubting myself, wondering if I had missed something, if I had misunderstood everything. That's when I decided to check the security footage. It had been months since I'd thought to look at the footage from our house's cameras. I had installed them as a precaution, but I had never expected to need them like this. I logged in, my fingers trembling as I navigated through the system, searching for any moments that could provide clarity. What I found shocked me. The footage was from the months Maxine had been living with us. I watched hours of video, my stomach churning with every second. Jensen and Maxine had left together so many times when I wasn't around. They'd gotten into his car, driven off, and returned hours later. It seemed innocent at first, just casual outings, but there was something about their proximity, the way they moved around each other, that sent a chill down my spine. It was too familiar, too comfortable. It wasn't the behavior of friends. But what hit hardest was the video from October, 2 months before I had confronted them. The timestamp showed it was well past midnight, and they were walking to the front door, close enough for their arms to brush. Jensen had his arm around her waist, and before they went inside, they stopped and kissed. It wasn't a friendly kiss. It wasn't a kiss of comfort or support. It was full of desire, full of a passion I had never seen between them before. My breath caught in my throat, and my mind scrambled to make sense of it. They had been together long before I even knew about their betrayal. I watched the footage over and over, my hands shaking as I saved it, as I made sure I had all the proof I needed. This was the truth. There was no denying it now. Maxine had been sleeping with my husband for months, and he had lied about it, covering it up with every excuse imaginable. I didn't know what to do with this knowledge at first. I felt a sickened satisfaction that I had finally uncovered the truth, but it also felt like a curse. I was drowning in it. How could I confront them with this? How could I face Jensen knowing he had known all along? But I knew I had to act. The next day I called my lawyer, the same one who had been handling the divorce paperwork. I told her everything about the footage, about Maxine, about the lies. She was silent for a moment before speaking, her voice calm but resolute. "This is exactly what you need," she said. "This footage will help your case. It shows the timeline. It shows that they were lying about when the affair started. This is what we need to push forward in the divorce proceedings." I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that at least this part of the battle was no longer in the shadows. The truth was there, clear as day. But there was still the matter of confronting them. I needed them to hear it from me. I needed them to know the depth of my hurt. That evening, I gathered the courage to face Jensen. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't keep living with this unresolved pain. I set the footage up on the TV, my heart pounding as I waited for him to walk through the door. When he finally did, I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the screen where the footage was paused. He stared at it, his face going pale, and for a moment he said nothing. The silence stretched on, unbearable and thick. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost apologetic. "Claudia, I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." I couldn't contain the anger anymore. "You didn't plan for it? Really, Jensen?" I stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You didn't plan to betray me? You didn't plan to destroy everything we've built? You didn't plan to sleep with my best friend behind my back while I'm dealing with everything at home? Do you really think I'll just let you talk your way out of this?" His eyes darted to the floor. He didn't have an answer. His silence spoke louder than anything else could. "I want you out," I said, the words final, unyielding. "Pack your things. You're leaving." The days following that confrontation were like walking through a haze. The house felt different, emptier, colder, as if the very walls had absorbed the betrayal and were now echoing with it. Jensen had packed his things in silence, his movements stiff and mechanical. He didn't try to explain himself any further. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choice, and there was nothing left for me to hold on to. I watched him walk out the door, suitcase in hand, the door closing behind him with a finality that made my heart feel like it was breaking all over again. But there was no anger left in me, no rage. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a hollow emptiness. I had wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand answers. But what was the point? There was nothing he could say that would make this right. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where he had once sat. Maxine's absence felt equally suffocating. Her room was still untouched, her belongings scattered around the house like ghosts of what had been. I hadn't spoken to her since I kicked her out, but the weight of what had happened hung between us like a thick, impenetrable fog. It felt like my life had split into two distinct halves, the life I had known and the life I was now forced to face, a life that was broken, fractured beyond repair. And yet the hardest part was knowing that the people I had trusted most had abandoned me when I needed them the most. Maxine's texts had stopped coming, and for that, I was grateful. But they had been replaced with something worse, the silence of the people I thought were my friends. Some of them reached out with apologies, but I could see the hesitation behind their words, the subtle judgment in their messages. I heard what happened with Maxine. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Do you need anything? It wasn't sympathy. It was pity. They didn't understand. None of them did. But the worst part of it all was the constant reminder of what had been lost. I would sit in our bedroom, staring at the empty space on the bed where Jensen used to sleep, where he had held me in the quiet hours of the night. I remembered how he used to laugh at my jokes, how he used to call me his best friend, how we used to dream of a future together. Now all I could do was cry, quietly, silently, because I had no idea who I was anymore. The kids were oblivious, as children often are, but they knew something was wrong. Abby, my oldest, would ask why Grandma and Grandpa hadn't called, why they couldn't visit anymore. She'd look up at me with her big brown eyes, confusion written across her face. I had no answers. I couldn't give her answers, because I didn't understand it either. I would tell her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and that we all had to work through them. But inside, I was breaking. I remember one night in particular. It was late, after the kids had gone to bed. The house was quiet, too quiet. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring out the window at the lights of the city. My mind was a whirlwind, a constant loop of memories and regrets. I could still hear the sound of Maxine's voice, the sound of Jensen's lies. And all I could think was that everything I had believed in, my marriage, my friendship, my family, had been a lie. I had built my life around people who didn't value me the way I thought they did. The tears came again, hot and angry, and I buried my face in my hands. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice breaking. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I can't keep going like this, pretending like I don't feel like I'm drowning. It was in that moment that I realized how far I had fallen. I had spent so much time trying to keep everything together, trying to fix things for everyone else, that I had lost myself in the process. The woman I used to be, the woman who stood tall, who was strong, who believed in love and loyalty, was gone. And I didn't know how to get her back. I didn't know who I was without him, without her. I didn't know how to heal the hurt, how to put the pieces of my broken heart back together. It felt like a dark, endless tunnel, and no matter how hard I tried to reach the light, I couldn't. But that was the turning point, the moment I hit rock bottom. Because in the darkness, something inside me shifted. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't some grand revelation. But slowly, over the next few days, I began to understand something important. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't weak. I wasn't defined by Jensen or Maxine or anyone else. I was still me, and I had a choice. It was strange how, after hitting rock bottom, I began to feel a spark of strength within me. It wasn't much at first, just a flicker, but it was enough to start shifting my perspective. The weeks after Jensen left were long and painful, but I began to understand that I wasn't just a victim in this story. I had control over how I moved forward. The turning point came when I received the package from Maxine. At first, I was so consumed with anger that I almost threw it out without opening it, but something inside me told me to look at it. I had to see it, every single piece of the truth. I opened the box carefully, almost as if handling something fragile. It was the apology I never wanted, filled with bath products and a bottle of wine, nothing that could erase the betrayal. But then, beneath all the unnecessary tokens of remorse, I found the photos. The photos of Jensen and Maxine together in bed, in each other's arms, smiling like everything was normal, like I was the one who didn't matter. I had expected to feel rage again, to pick up the phone and scream at them both. But as I looked at the photos, something unexpected happened. The tears didn't come. Instead, I felt a cold clarity settle in my chest. This wasn't just about Jensen. This wasn't just about Maxine. This was about me. It was about my own journey, my own healing. And I knew at that moment I could no longer let myself be trapped by their actions. I didn't have to beg for answers. I didn't have to wait for their apologies. I had everything I needed: strength, evidence, and the realization that I didn't need them in my life anymore. I took the photos and saved them. Then, without hesitation, I forwarded them to my lawyer. I didn't need to be afraid anymore. The truth was out there now, and I had the upper hand. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The weight on my chest had lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I could still hear my kids playing in their rooms, their laughter a reminder that they needed me. They needed me to be strong. I didn't want them to carry this burden any longer than necessary. Stephen called later that day. His voice was different, softer, almost apologetic. He said he wanted to talk, said he was sorry for what he had done, that he had messed up. But I didn't need his apology. What I needed was to make sure I was doing what was best for me and for the kids. I have the photos, Jensen, I said, my voice calm but firm. I know everything, and I'm done trying to fix something that can't be fixed. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he spoke again, his voice tinged with guilt. Claudia, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't need to hear it anymore. I'm done, Jensen. Don't call me again. I hung up the phone and sat down on the couch, feeling a sense of relief flood over me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at him or Maxine. It was about reclaiming my life. The power I had been searching for was within me all along. That evening, I called my lawyer. I told her I was ready to move forward with the divorce. I asked her to push for a settlement that would ensure I would be financially secure, that I would be able to provide for my children and build a new life without any strings attached to Jensen or Maxine. The next few weeks were filled with legal meetings, paperwork, and the slow but steady march toward freedom. It wasn't easy. There were days when the pain still crept up, when I would catch myself missing what could have been, or feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. But I kept moving forward, one step at a time. I started to make plans for the future. I looked at the house, the home I had once built with Jensen, and began to think about how I would make it my own again. The kids and I would start fresh. We would create new memories in a space that was ours, free of the ghosts of their lies. And through it all, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their love. I had everything I needed to rebuild. In that moment, I knew that I would be okay. More than okay. I would be better than I had ever been before. The aftermath of the truth was a complicated web of emotions, decisions, and inevitable consequences. The pieces were falling into place faster than I could have imagined, and while some parts of it brought a quiet sense of justice, others cut deeply into wounds I thought would eventually heal on their own. I had expected Jensen to fight back. I had expected him to try to minimize what he had done, to justify it or make excuses. But instead, he went silent. He didn't call me. He didn't try to reach out. For a while, I thought maybe he was reflecting. Maybe he was genuinely sorry for what had happened. But I soon realized it was more than that. Jensen wasn't just ashamed. He was lost. He had no answers, no excuse that could cover the depth of his betrayal. It wasn't just Jensen's silence that was overwhelming. It was the cold, distant reactions from everyone else. I had expected my friends to rally around me, to defend me, to offer support. But as Maxine's lies spread, so did the twisted version of the story. People I had once considered close friends started to reach out to me, but their words were less about empathy and more about gossip. It became clear that the sides were being drawn. Maxine, in her desperation to rewrite the narrative, began posting on social media again. The posts were so carefully curated, so filled with hollow, rehearsed words about second chances and finding true love. She tagged me in every photo she posted as if to say, "Look at me now. Look at what I have. Look at what you don't." She and Jensen began flaunting their relationship. It was hard to escape. I saw their photos at restaurants, parks, even at the beach. Their captions dripped with irony. New beginnings. Finally found what I was looking for. It felt like they were trying to bury me in their new life, trying to erase everything that had come before. And yet the more they flaunted their so-called love, the more the cracks in their shiny new world began to show. Their posts started receiving more and more judgment. Friends who had once sided with Maxine now started asking questions. And while I didn't reach out to them, the truth seemed to spread on its own. Slowly, some of them began to pull away from her. Her posts became less frequent, and the comments grew colder. People who had once admired her began to question her motives, to ask why she had betrayed her best friend for a man who had shown so little respect for anyone, least of all her. Jensen, too, began to feel the sting of his choices. The people he had once turned to for support, his family, friends, colleagues, were now distancing themselves. They could see the truth, even if he refused to admit it. Maxine's mother reached out to me privately, sending me a message that, for the first time, acknowledged the pain she had caused. She told me she was sorry, but the words felt like an echo. Too little, too late. She confessed that she had tried to warn Maxine, that she didn't approve of her pursuit of Jensen, but her daughter wouldn't listen. The blowback wasn't just from the people around us. It came from within our finances as well. During the divorce proceedings, Jensen's lawyer fought hard, trying to minimize his responsibilities. They contested my claim for alimony and insisted that I wasn't entitled to half the house's value. But they underestimated my resolve. The evidence I had, Maxine's emails, the photographs, the security footage, was irrefutable. It forced them into a corner. In the end, they had no choice but to settle. Jensen agreed to give me 50% of the house's value, along with alimony for 3 years, and he agreed to cover my legal fees. It was a bittersweet victory. It was enough to allow me to move on, but it wasn't the financial compensation that I truly needed. It was the closure, the certainty that I was not going to let him control the narrative anymore. This was my life, and I was taking it back. Maxine and Jensen, however, were not as fortunate. Despite their efforts to portray their relationship as some kind of triumphant love story, it was clear that their foundation was cracked. Jensen began missing work to deal with personal matters. The facade of their happy life began to crumble slowly. People began to talk, and Maxine's social media presence shifted from celebration to defense. The more she tried to prove how perfect their life was, the more it seemed to fall apart. I found out from mutual friends that they had been struggling financially. With Jensen's alimony payments and the strain of a baby on the way, they were forced to downsize. They moved into a smaller apartment, which only deepened the cracks in their already fragile relationship. Maxine's mother told me, in a rare and candid conversation, that she had begun to see the truth. She admitted she had always known there were flaws in their relationship, but had refused to see it. She confessed that the pressure Maxine had put on herself to win Jensen had been too great. She had never considered the consequences, only the desire to hold on to something that wasn't hers to begin with. But by then, it didn't matter to me anymore. I had learned that their actions didn't define my worth. I didn't need to see them suffer to feel validated. Their pain was no longer my burden to carry. The most powerful part of it all was that I had begun to heal. The more I moved forward, the more I realized how much I had underestimated myself. The strength I found in those dark moments was something I would carry with me forever. I was rebuilding, not just my life, but my sense of self. For the first time in months, I felt free. It's strange how, after all the pain, I can look back now and realize that I have found peace. The journey has been long and full of challenges, but I am standing here, stronger than I've ever been before. I've learned more about myself in these past few months than I ever imagined possible. The divorce is final, the house is sold, and I've moved on. The kids and I have found a new rhythm in our lives. We're in a small apartment now, but it's our space. No reminders of the past, no ghosts of what was once my home. It's quiet here, but in a way that feels right. The noise of the past has faded, and what remains is the steady beat of our lives moving forward. I still think about what happened, of course. It's impossible not to. But I've stopped dwelling on the pain and betrayal. I no longer wake up in the middle of the night with tears in my eyes, wondering what went wrong. I know now that I didn't do anything to deserve this. I didn't ask for any of it, and it wasn't my fault. The most important lesson I've learned through all of this is that my worth doesn't come from the people who let me down. It doesn't come from the family members who turned their backs on me or the best friend who betrayed me. My worth comes from within. It comes from my ability to stand up when I've been knocked down, to keep going when it feels like there's no way forward. I've also learned that forgiveness is a complicated thing. I'm not ready to forgive Jensen or Maxine yet, and I'm okay with that. I've given myself the space to heal, and that's more important than rushing to make peace with people who hurt me. Perhaps in time I'll be able to forgive them, not for their sake, but for my own. But for now, I don't need their forgiveness. I've already forgiven myself. As for the future, I'm cautiously hopeful. I'm focused on being the best mother I can be for Abby, Noah, and Amelia. They are my heart, and I will continue to protect them with everything I have. They're growing up in a new chapter of our lives, one that's more peaceful and honest than the one we left behind. I'm also starting to think about what comes next for me, beyond just surviving. I'm exploring new opportunities in my career. I'm rediscovering things I used to love: writing, reading, walking in the park alone, and just taking time for myself. Slowly, I'm learning to love my own company again. I've learned that life isn't always fair, and people won't always treat you the way you deserve. But the one thing I know for certain is that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. I'm not defined by what happened. I'm defined by how I rise above it. And while I don't know what the future holds, I do know this: I will face it on my own terms. I'm moving forward one day at a time, and that's enough.